Are we all set, Manny? Perfect. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Economic Development Plan Public Input Meeting. My name is John Durgan. I'm the Economic Development Manager here for the City of Boynton Beach. And I have with me here Ned Murray of the FIU Metropolitan Center, who's going to be doing a presentation tonight on some of the preliminary findings of our Economic Development Plan. The goal of the plan is really to provide a roadmap, a plan of action for our city economically, to identify initiatives, strategies, policies, programs that would really help lift our local economy here, to help our small businesses, to help our residents, help with development and redevelopment, just to look at our city holistically using quantitative data as well as qualitative data. So we wanted to have a setting here where we engage with the public so we can get their input into the conversation. So we're really looking forward to this plan, really excited about it. Ned and his team have done an amazing job with it. And I'll go ahead and let him get started, and I'll pass over to Ned.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ned Murray. I am the Associate Director of the George Perez Metropolitan Center at FIU. And I'm joined tonight by, I know at least one of our team. Leslie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Gray. I work for an economic development consulting firm called John Stover & Associates. We're working with FIU on this endeavor.
Anybody else with us? Okay. I think we may be joined by, well, as John said, this plan was put in place based upon discussions we had just about 9 months ago relative to a blueprint, a path forward for the city to be able to take advantage of a lot of the opportunities that are out there right now in the county, but also to establish the city of Boynton Beach on its own right, its own merits. The other key part of that was also a follow-up of the comprehensive equity needs assessment, which was a critical foundation piece to the economic development plan. So as the process evolved, we received a lot of input from business leaders, community leaders, through stakeholder roundtables, interviews that we conducted. There have been at least one meeting before the City Commission on the State of the Economy report. And so we've had these opportunities to be able to get more input into the plan itself, because ultimately, and this is really, really important, this plan isn't FIU's or John Stover & Associates, this is your plan. And we're only going to draft a plan that is the City of Boynton Beach's plan, because it's the plan that has to go forward, and it has to be really built on the consensus of the community. And that's how plans actually get implemented and get implemented successfully. So these goals you see are very thoughtful, because they really do come from the community. So number one was to grow and strengthen the city's economy by expanding economic opportunity, equity, and wealth building. And that's where the equity assessment, the comprehensive equity assessment that was done by the city over a year ago now, was, like I said, very foundational to what we're doing here. Rarely does a city do a comprehensive equity needs assessment as the foundation or the underpinnings for further planning. So what we have with the comprehensive equity needs assessment is really so much input from the community, so many ideas for moving forward and to address a lot of the issues, not only in terms of an equity, but what are the opportunities, especially now in this booming economy. The number two part is we all have been through economic shocks before, all through South Florida and the country for that matter. We need to build more resilient economies that can withstand the types of economic shocks that we've been through, most recently with COVID, but before that we had the Great Recession, before that we had the tech boom bust. It's been one after another. So our economies have to become more resilient, and there's a lot that cities can do on their own, irrespective of what's going on in the country or the state or the world for that matter, to make themselves more resilient. We use that word resiliency a lot for the environment, but it's just as critical that we think resiliency when we talk about the economy. And then lastly is this branding part. I've been here a long time myself, working here in Boynton Beach, about 25 years with the center, and I've been here probably about 15 years now. I know how important branding is for this city. All the other cities are doing it. Delray to our south, West Palm Beach to our north, Jupiter. We need to be right there, and I think we can. I think we really can establish ourselves as a city that is as competitive as any city in Palm Beach County in South Florida, but also one that also distinguishes itself from a lot of what we're seeing in South Florida and here in Palm Beach County. And that's really important too. So that's where the brand comes in. The process itself, as I mentioned, it started with a number of different interviews with the community and the business leaders here in the community. We had a series of roundtable discussions with both business and community members. The most recent one with small businesses that are here in Boynton Beach, businesses that are minority owned in the Palm Beach Boulevard area and in other areas that don't get the attention that a lot of businesses do. So we wanted to really talk to the small business and get their input. So a lot of what we're doing reflects their input as well. We did, as I mentioned, submit a presentation which was presented back in February to the City Commission on the state of the economy. Some of those key points I'm going to go over real quickly right after these points. We will then have a public meeting with tonight, and that of course is going to take us to the next step, which is the actual submission of the plans and the public meetings and hearings that will come about as a result of that. If need be, we'll go back to the stakeholders again, because that's something we've done in the past. If we feel, or if the community feels that they would like some more input.
We'll see the next slide, maybe, so we can follow along.
Oh, just do next slide?
Yeah, so whatever slide you're on.
Okay.
That's where we are right now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Next slide. The first step in the first phase of the study, the first step in the process was doing a competitive assessment of the key findings. And what we did is we benchmarked the city of Boynton Beach against other cities in not only Palm Beach, but in other parts of Florida that the city felt were the types of cities that they would like to compare themselves to, which is always a really smart thing to do when you're doing an economic development plan, is to see how other cities are doing, especially among your competition here in Palm Beach County, but other cities around the state that have been successful or have shown some propensity for economic growth. So for the most part, the city did very, very well in that benchmarking, and we do have those numbers to share with you as well. But number one, when we look at the competitive assessment, we always look at location. And as you all know, Boynton Beach is located centrally in Palm Beach County, great highway access right in the middle of the county, with a lot of activity occurring to the north of us, to the south of us, to the west of us. So there's no reason why Boynton Beach cannot take advantage of that. High labor force participation. This is something that we look for when we do a study, but it's also something that investors, developers look for, is the fact that you have a working community, people in the labor force. So that's 63.5%, 63.8% labor force participation rate is relatively high to your competition. Real important thing. Positive recovery since COVID as far as employment growth and business growth. Significant growth in the city's young professional population, higher than most of your competition, your benchmark cities. Significant number of establishments and workers in the advanced industry sector. This was something we looked at early on because we do this in all the other cities that we work in. The advanced industry sector, the top industry sectors in the country and in the world for that matter, as far as pay, value added, investment, research and development, these are the ones you want in your community or nearby. So you do have a significant representation of those businesses here in Boynton Beach, as does the county. Palm Beach County has one of the highest percentages of advanced industry employment in the state of Florida, far above the state as a whole. Significant presence of the county's targeted industries. The Business Development Board here in Palm Beach has identified a number of targeted industry clusters that you also have representation of. We're going to get into some of those numbers in a bit because they're going to be very, very important to our strategic thinking as we move forward. Industrial space, good news here compared to some of your competitors like to your south and Delray that has very little, 5.3 million square feet. Problem is a lot of it is being occupied right now, and we'll get into that in a minute. Housing market, really a critical issue right now. Boynton Beach is competitive relative to the housing market, even though you have really important issues to deal with here in terms of housing affordability. But right now, Boynton Beach is a little more affordable than a lot of these other communities. And then resurging retail activity. And Leslie's going to be able to talk about that a little bit more, but that was one of the real key findings that came out of our competitive advantage assessment early on in the process. Next slide. As far as the challenges go, we know we have an underdeveloped downtown. So that's going to be a focus of what we're doing. We have an excessive outflow of resident workers. I'll share a map with you, but that means that 27,500 of those workers that I mentioned within that labor force participation rate, that high labor force participation rate, they leave the city each day for jobs elsewhere in the county. Lagging job growth compared to some of your benchmark cities. Vast majority of your jobs in low wage service sector employment. That's one of the reasons why we talk about diversifying, expanding your economic base. As I mentioned, you have a lot of industrial space, but most of it is occupied, 1.5% vacancy rate. This is going to be a critical part of our analysis and strategic thinking. Limited land suitable for industrial development and a growing need for mixed income housing or housing affordability in general. Next slide. The city had previously identified 7 economic development target areas, and we will address them as part of this plan. Now, in how we address them is really important as part of our strategic thinking, because obviously most economic development target areas or target areas in general are quite large, so we need to focus in. But it's important that you have them because that's where we have to start. So the 7 that the city has identified is the downtown and marina area, the heart of Boynton, Boynton Beach Boulevard, the medical district down around Bethesda, the Congress Ave district, which includes the Boynton Beach Mall, the High Ridge Transit-Oriented Development District, and the Woolbright Road district. So you can see that these are fairly large districts, but they're key because these are the areas of the city with the highest levels of commercial and industrial properties. So the economic development is going to occur in these areas. In the case of the heart of Boynton, we don't have a lot of commercial land. We certainly don't have any industrial land, but being the heart of Boynton and given the population of the heart of Boynton, and based upon the analysis that was done as part of the comprehensive equity assessment, this is a critical area for economic development within that lens of community economic development. We're going to get into that in a little bit. So with that, next slide. We want to just give you a little bit of information before we get into some of the analysis that we'll be doing about each of these districts. What we're looking at is your population and your employment and the businesses in each of these districts. You can see here the downtown has a population of about 9,160 establishments, private sector jobs of about 1,153. That's not a lot for a downtown area. So obviously that issue of redevelopment is going to be really important. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The Heart of Boynton District, as I mentioned, population 5,400. We can see those business establishments, only 34 in a fairly large area. Of course, most of it is residential, but only 34 businesses. And private sector jobs, you can see that number obviously very low as well. Next slide. The Boynton Beach Boulevard District, population over 7,000, 7,200. You see 45 establishments and private sector jobs of 214. Next slide, please. This is the Woolbright Road District. You see a much larger population here, over 16,000 establishments, 155 private sector jobs, 1715. Still not a whole lot for a whole district, a whole boulevard like commercial boulevard like Woolbright Road. Next. The medical district, of course, where Bethesda is and the surrounding medical office buildings, you have a population of about 3,900, establishments of 55. And here you can see obviously significant more employment because of the hospital and the medical buildings around there of over 3,500 jobs. So obviously this area has a competitiveness that's already in place. Next slide. The Congress Ave district, as I mentioned, is where the Boynton Beach Mall is. Big population out in this area of over 25,000. Businesses 472. Private sector jobs of over 7,000. Obviously an area that has a lot of commercial land, a lot of opportunities for growth, but that 7,000 figure could probably be a lot more for an area with that much commercial property. And of course you have a mall that's obviously not doing as well as a regional mall should. So that's obviously part of the problem, but also you have a lot of underdevelopment along commercial, along Congress and Palm Beach, Boynton Beach Boulevard. So that's an issue that we're facing in a lot of these commercial corridors, is the lack of development in terms of jobs. The underdevelopment in these areas where you have critical supplies of commercial land that's being underutilized is really, really critical to our understanding of how we go about in creating economic growth, particularly along these commercial boulevards. It's also an opportunity in these areas for addressing our housing affordability issues, because along these transit corridors, you also have opportunities for mixed use, higher density that can also address not only jobs, but housing affordability. Next slide. The High Ridge TOD district, which your planning department had identified, obviously a big population out in this area because they've taken the TOD districts, extended it south to along the rail, and then east along Palm Beach, Boynton Beach Boulevard. So it takes in a large area, but along these transit corridors, both the rail corridor and the bus routes, you have opportunity for different types of TOD. The issue here is equitable TOD. So what we try to get across to all the cities we work in is when we talk about TOD, because you are talking about prime real estate that's industrial, commercial, that we think in terms of these areas as for equitable transit-oriented development, opportunities for mixed use and mixed income housing as well. So it's good that you have this district in place, but we have to start to put meat on the bones in terms of what does that mean in terms of development potential along all those routes that entail that district. Next. Okay, so with the analysis already in place, that being a competitive assessment, we have begun thinking in terms of looking at the various corridors, your economic base in general, looking at the city's industries, looking at your zoning and land use, and we are now developing these ideas, these concepts that we want to share with you. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, I think we probably moved ahead of a little bit here. Yeah, maybe maybe we can just go back then. If we can just go forward again, just maybe what happened is some of the slides get mixed up here. Yeah, we should be looking at no, we should be looking at okay. We can start with the first one. It is right. I'm sorry. It's my. Okay, so we can go back to the one more. Okay, planning concept one. Wouldn't be called planning concept one if it wasn't the first one, right? Okay, so the idea here is going back to the discussion I had about diversifying, expanding the economic base, creating a more resilient economy here in the city, and also addressing a lot of the equity issues and opportunities. The first one has to be the idea of how we do that. How does that economic base get expanded? And where are those opportunities for growth? So I mentioned the advanced industry sector, and I mentioned the targeted industries that are in not only the city, but in the county as a whole. Next slide. So here's the analysis that we've done relative to the advanced industry sector. These are the leading sectors, as you can see, both in Palm Beach County and in Boynton, and you can see how representative the city is relative to the county. So the leading sectors within this larger advanced industry grouping are representative both in the county and in the city. So the fact is that you have these opportunities and you already have these assets in place. In fact, we've already looked at some of the growth in these areas more recently, and what we have found is that the top three continue to grow. They're growing by the day. So these are real opportunities. As I mentioned, it's these advanced industry sectors where we find the better jobs, the better paying jobs, jobs that are more likely to stay, the jobs that will provide more investment in the community. So it's really important that we look at these and figure out how do we retain and expand the ones that we have. We need to learn a little bit more about them, what they do, what their products and services are, and find out if there's anything that we can do to help with their business plans. What we have found over the years is that you have establishments in very key sectors. A lot of times they're in manufacturing and various types of technologies. They're in these business parks or office parks that you find off the railroads and in these locations that are really hard to find. We see it all up and down Dixie Highway. We find it up and down the FEC corridor in general. And this is where a lot of these exist. A lot of them also exist as home occupations. These are small firms that maybe are individuals that work out of their homes. So that's an important thing to know. So the advanced industry sector is the #1 industry sector that we'll be looking at. And of course, that includes a lot of subsectors, as you can see there. Next slide, please. That's the mapping that we did of those businesses. And you can see the top three that I mentioned, the top three: architectural, engineering, and related services, computer systems design, and management, scientific and technical. These are your top three. These are the county's top three. And you can see them located throughout the county going west, but you can also see a number of them located within the city's limits. So we need to find out a little bit more about these companies and what they do, like I said, and begin thinking in terms of growth strategies. Business retention, business expansion. Really, really important when we talk about these types of sectors. Next slide, please. Here are the top cluster industries in the city. And you can see that there are 6 that we have identified here in Boynton Beach that are representative of the county as well. The big one, of course, is healthcare. You saw those jobs down around Bethesda that we just showed you. You can also see the number of establishments, the employment that we talked about. But you're also representative in some others: financial services down at the bottom, manufacturing, distribution, logistics, marine, and life sciences. So these are all right. These businesses are already in the city. They're already in the city, and obviously throughout the county. And many of these sectors, by the way, these cluster of targeted industries are also in other counties like Broward County, the South. So we're competing with these other counties, but the idea that you already have them, I can tell you as a former economic development director myself in government, trying to get these types of industries to locate in your city is really, really difficult. When you already have them, there's a lot you can do, because then you can focus your attention, like I said, more on industry retention and expansion as opposed to attraction. The attraction model is much, much more difficult. So really, really important that we have this combination of advanced industries and cluster industries already located here, and probably already providing some type of connection between their businesses and the ones that already exist in the county, because that's how clusters typically work. They do complement one another. There's a supply chain, and it's complementary supporting sectors that contribute to those industries. So we're going to look more into that, because these are really, really important opportunities, particularly for the businesses that we're looking to start up, in a place like heart of Boynton or Boynton Beach Boulevard, or some of the areas where we don't have a lot of jobs right now, a lot of businesses. These are opportunities for businesses to be able to link into these existing clusters, these existing industries that are already there. So a lot better, I can tell you from our experience, to already have them in place. Next slide. I just wanted to include the zoning map because we spend a lot of time. I'm also a planner by background. We spend a lot of time looking at your land use and zoning, because the first thing we want to look at are those areas where you have commercial and industrial land. You can see those areas in gray up north of Boynton Beach Boulevard, up towards Gateway, to the west of the I-95 corridor and the railroad. These are really, really important areas, because this is where you have some establishments already in place. I took a drive through there the other day, and you have an aerospace company there. You have a lot of other companies that are just sitting there, but probably don't get a lot of attention. But these are the areas that you need to preserve, but these are the areas that you have these real opportunities. And then, as you can see in these other areas over on towards Federal and Boynton Beach Boulevard, and down across Congress Avenue, coming down Congress Avenue, is where you see these areas where you see a lot of commercial land, commercial properties and commercial land use. So these are the areas that we also want to focus on, as I mentioned earlier. So that's got to be our number one focus, is how do we grow our economy? How do we expand and diversify our economic base? And how to best to do that? Well, how the best you can do that is not to just wish things would happen, but actually identify those sectors, and in this case, the advanced industry sector and the cluster industries that we know are already here, and we can grow, we can help grow them, in the long term. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show this once again. I referenced it earlier on, the outflow, because if the question is asked, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to attract all these businesses and grow them? Well, that is the reason why. Because most of our workers, as I mentioned earlier, that high labor force participation rate, that 27,000 are leaving the city each day and commuting out on 95 or the Turnpike. We want to be able to create those jobs for them so they can live here, improve their quality of life, raise their families. And you can see right now we've only got about 3,900 workers who actually live and work in the city of Boynton Beach. You shouldn't feel real bad about that, because we've done this study in many, many other cities in South Florida, and the numbers look very much alike. Because we all been out on 95 and the Turnpike every morning, so we know that's pretty much the case. But we can be different. Boynton Beach can be different because we can grow our own economy. We can create those businesses. We can create those jobs so that labor force, that strong labor force that we have, can stay here and live here and play here. Next. Okay. The next step, and all these will obviously run concurrent, is to take those 7 targeted areas that we just talked about and to really begin to drill down into those areas where we see opportunities for development, catalyst types of projects. We need to have catalyst projects in order to get things going in all those 7 districts, and particularly certain ones that are really lagging behind, like the heart of Boynton. So what we've started to do, and I'm going to let Leslie take over in a minute. Let's just do one more slide first, I think. Yeah, let's show those, and I'll let Leslie take over. So what we've identified, and it was your planning department and your economic development department, are these areas that within these 7 districts are these like micro districts, these areas where there's some real opportunities, because this is where there's already some activity, there's already assets in place. And so we want to be able to focus on those areas in order to get these larger districts underway. So with that, I'll turn it over to Leslie, and she'll spend a little more time on what we have planned for the micro districts. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ned. Like Ned mentioned, we've been looking very comprehensively at this economic development strategy and the research to date, looking at everything from these advanced industries down to also acknowledging your retailers, your small businesses, your home-based businesses, to kind of think through how do all these pieces fit together. What's really exciting about Boynton Beach is you have these opportunities for economic development clusters and enhancements all throughout your city. And what's really interesting is how do we start to piece these things together to start to create stronger synergies, stronger growth, more resilient and livable communities. We can go to the next slide. Like Ned mentioned, we've been taking an analytical look at the 6 or 7 targeted districts, also acknowledging that there's some smaller districts within those, such as the Brewery District within that High Ridge TOD district. Also looking at, of course, Federal Highway, with that playing a really signature role in the city's overall identity and branding, your arts district, your cultural district, how these pieces fit together. Next slide. And what we're finding is comprehensively, Boynton Beach has a lot to offer. Our competitive assessment analysis has been really exciting. There's a lot of really exciting things happening in Boynton Beach, but you've been hard at work on your economic development to date. We've done a deeper dive in the retail landscape and looking at the retail businesses that are coming to Boynton Beach? How are things looking on the ground? We're looking at other business attraction strategies. What we find is that there's so much excitement happening in this region, and Boynton Beach is really at the center of it all. While it still remains kind of a pocket of affordability, right? Obviously concerns with rising costs, but it's still relative to your region, an opportunity for ability while tapping into that affluent nearby customer base and visitors to create an economy that really supports its neighborhood and its neighborhood community. We're finding that your retail landscape has untapped demand, has opportunities for growth, and outside customer growth potential. Boynton Beach is very residential, locally serving in terms of your businesses, but there's still that opportunity to bring in more visitors, to bring in more spending dollars to support your businesses. What we know too, and in our conversations, is that the city is committed to being an inclusive and business-friendly city, home to many small and importantly growing businesses, and city staff that wants to work to say yes and welcome new businesses while supporting its existing businesses. And we're finding a whole range of opportunities. You have those opportunities to locate in the shopping mall, to have that big box anchor space, but to also have that small scale walkable cultural district environment or having that home-based business opportunity. There's really an opportunity for everyone in Boynton Beach in terms of your economic development. Next slide. And as we go through this process, what we've been doing is we've been obviously diving into the data, nerding out on interesting data sources, on different findings, but we're bringing this back to strategy. So what does that mean? We need to think through what are the opportunities out here. And with this idea of these districts, what we're finding is there's so much that's been so positive in Boynton Beach in terms of that growth, in terms of that economy, but what we want to do through this plan is really turn the volume up or amplify. How do we move Boynton Beach towards a livable economy for the future? When we think about that opportunity, what we're looking at is places and experiences for people, and then also having that marketing, stories, connections side of the equation. So how can we get those resources and conduits for better partnerships and connections? And how can we share the stories about what makes Boynton Beach great and why people want to live, work, and play here? When we think about that duality of the places and experiences and the marketing stories and connections, and we think, how do we build this into an implementable strategy? We're starting to look through about 4 buckets. So the next slide. Perfect. Thank you for moving the screen down a little bit. And those 4 buckets are thinking through within these districts and within Boynton Beach's larger overall economy, how can we support more businesses through placemaking and marketing? How can we encourage more customers to shop at our Boynton Beach businesses? How can we help enhance the community through economic development? And lastly, create more opportunity for everyone in the city. Next slide. And I'm going to just kind of go through this a little bit rapid fire, and we can always have more conversations. When we think about this opportunity to support the businesses in these districts, we're thinking not only about attracting those businesses, attracting those advanced industries that Ned's referring to, but also importantly, retaining our businesses that we do have, having that growth opportunity within Boynton Beach. So from attracting your small businesses, helping to grow your home-based entrepreneurs, and then also, potentially bringing in corporate headquarters. Why can't anyone open a headquarters here in Boynton Beach? Why wouldn't you want that? There's a lot going on here that's exciting. And then really start to market and communicate those cities' competitive advantages to help showcase what you have to offer for the future. When we move to think about the customers, so the next slide. When we think about attracting more customers, bringing those customers to your businesses, what we're finding in this post-COVID, post-pandemic economy is more and more the importance of placemaking efforts and branding. Within each of these districts, they have their own brand, they have their own identity, they have their targeted clusters, and a lot of movement has been already in place in those placemaking efforts. So having those street banners identifying, hey, you're in the cultural district. How can we amplify that? How can we better support that and broaden that effort to enhance that residential, workforce, and visitor-based market, all of which are going to help be your customers for the future. Next slide. A major theme that you're going to hear us talk about today and in future conversations, and I'm sure you've heard to date if you've been following along, is this idea of emphasizing and incorporating community-based economic development strategies. This is not only about protecting and ensuring that you have pathways for continued affordability in Boynton Beach, but it's also about addressing livability needs within these districts, such as, for example, the lack of grocery options in that heart of Boynton district. So how do each of these districts stack up to have that live, work, play emphasis? And then also a really big opportunity to tie in those findings from that equitable needs assessment, to leverage that into making sure that future decision making that's ingrained in part of it. What we found through Boynton Beach is this broad network of community institutions and partnerships that the city's been already at work with, that the community's been already at work with connecting to your businesses, connecting to your entrepreneurs. What can we do in the future to continue these and bolster these partnerships? And then lastly, similarly, when we think about what's the opportunity here, well, that's about continuing to ensure that Boynton Beach is an opportunity for everyone, supporting and facilitating that entrepreneurship ecosystem, that clear pathway if you want to start a business, if you want to have a home-based business, but also to attract or to retain those existing businesses as the region evolves. Obviously, there's really considerable amount of change that's occurring in the broader economy that's going to affect Boynton Beach. What can we put in place to make sure that legacy businesses can continue on into the future? And then this overlaps really importantly to some of the other key findings that Ned talked about. How do we prioritize or talk through land use considerations for industrial users, for that diversified economy? How do we continue to prioritize workforce development investments so that you have more employment access for your residents and for your community, so you can strengthen that 3,000 plus living and working base into an even broader figure? With that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ned.
Thank you, Leslie. So as we've already noted, there are two of the three strategies that we're focusing on as far as these larger concepts are the advanced industries and the industry clusters that we think can help expand the city's economic base, but also create that more resilient economy and create opportunities for our residents and workers. Second part is to actually think more locational, is to take those 7 districts and zero in on those areas where we think that catalyst projects can come about. So that's a lot of what Leslie was really focusing in on there, is to think about some of these districts more in terms of micro districts where all those different elements could come into play. And that's where a lot of our strategy development will come from, is how we would do that within these locations, taking into consideration, as you mentioned, the businesses there, the community as a whole, and the opportunities that are there as well, and the customers that would obviously benefit and create that economy. So the third planning concept, which is obviously going to be really, really important, because this is how we implement a lot of what we're talking about. We implement it through specific economic development tools that have to be put in place. And I use the term specific because a lot of times when plans are done, they're put in generalities. We really have to talk about what specific economic development tools are needed in these micro districts and these larger districts that'll begin to move the needle. Okay. So the number one is financing, and financing comes in a lot of different ways. But the most important thing we're focused on here is community economic development financing, meaning small businesses that fall through the cracks when it comes to small business development financing, small business development assistance, businesses that have a hard time going to your banks. This is absolutely critical if we're going to do community economic development in places like the heart of Boynton and in other areas of the city. So a lot of focus will go into financing, targeting small business assistance. So there's going to be other types of assistance that are going to be necessary. Everything from when you're doing a business, you need a business plan. If you have a business, there's issues relative to permitting, there's issues relative to insurance. All these types of things have got to be taken into consideration when you're talking about small business development assistance, particularly in these micro businesses that we're really talking about here. Just so you know, South Florida in general, including Palm Beach and Boynton Beach, 85% of all businesses are under 10 employees, and close to 70% are under 5 employees. But this is your typical business to begin with. But what we're talking here is small micro businesses that also probably don't have a lot of capital, don't have a lot of equity in place, but they don't have the experience either when it comes to running a business. So there's a lot that has to be put in place to have a successful community economic development plan. 3 is the program development. What are the programs that we would want to put in place? Not only to assist businesses, but the communities at large, whether it be housing, whether it be programs geared more towards business development as a whole, programs put in place to begin thinking in terms of addressing some of the underdevelopment along the corridors. A number of different programs, but once again, very specific programs with real targets and with real outcomes. One thing I didn't mention here, by the way, which I will say right now, is 2 of the critical issues that are going to have to come out of this for it to be successful, this plan, is the management component and the performance metrics that go into it. Rarely do we see performance metrics put into an economic development plan. They will be built into this plan. We've had this discussion with David and John. We've talked about the management of the plan, because the plans don't get implemented unless you have management in place and you have support in place and you have the performance metrics in place, the accountability in place. So I didn't get to that yet, but when we start talking about some of these economic development tools, we have to think in terms of how they're managed, how they're implemented, and how they're accounted for. Zoning and land use, absolutely critical. We've had some discussions already about this, but there's always usually room for improvement, particularly if we want to target areas for say, maybe higher densities in terms of mixed use, or for housing affordability issues, or to create other incentives. Zoning and land use is probably the best incentive there is for doing what you are trying to do in terms of economic development. It doesn't cost you anything. In my experience and many other areas is that this is how things get done, because this is what developers and investors are looking at. What can you do with that property? If you can only do X amount, the numbers may not work. But if you can do this, and there's some flexibility with your zoning, then obviously there's a lot more that can be done. But once again, you just don't change your zoning just for the sake of changing your zoning. You change your zoning to address the specific strategies that you're trying to go after. Okay. So if there's a zoning change that would come before the city commission, it would come before you because we have specific strategies in place and we already have a really good sense of what the outcomes would be if that zoning was tweaked. Municipal services, and by that I use it in a very general sense, not just municipal services in terms of water, sewer, things like that, but municipal services in terms of all the things that local governments can provide. We've had conversations with John and David about small business development entity, small business development assistance being developed within the city's management structure and through the economic development office, so that we could create this back and forth link between the city government and the communities that are looking to take advantage of this plan in place. So it's a lot about its communication. It's about the types of services. It could have something to do with permitting. It could have something to do with other issues, security, public safety, whatever it may be. the city will be there for them. Okay. And then the last one is, you know, there typically are going to be needs in the areas of public infrastructure. And it's not necessarily redoing all your streets and things like that, but just public streetscape improvements. It's amazing what can be done, and we've seen it in many, many cities where you go into a neighborhood and make streetscape improvements. That can just be the initiative that a lot of times is needed to get the private sector then involved, is to see that there's a public investment in communities and they can visibly see it, and that the city is at the table and making these commitments. Then the private sector sees, okay, I see where this community is now being targeted, and there's investment in this community by the city and perhaps by others that we can now feel like maybe our investment would make a lot more sense or be a lot more protected. But all of this is going to be built into the plan. We can't leave one piece missing, because in order for it to be implemented, it's going to have to include all these various incentives, all these various tools, but it's how we do it, how we frame it, and how we manage it, and then ultimately how we implement it. Next slide, please. So we are at this point now. I don't know quite how that works. That's okay. We'll complete the draft of the Boynton Beach Economic Development Plan now that we've had all this input over the last 6 to 9 months. Our next order of business is to actually put these draft strategies in place and the plan in place, and come back to the city with that draft. We will then submit the final draft to the city, and obviously have whatever hearings the city decides to have, whether it be a workshop, which is common, or just some type of hearing. And then ultimately, you know, we need to then put the plan in place, implement the plan. So somehow that's that slide got intertwined with the other file. Is there another slide, by the way? I'm just curious. No? Going forward? Oh, okay, somehow. All right. Maybe it has something to do with the PowerPoint converting to the PDF. That's all I can understand, of some of these little disjoints. So that's essentially it in a nutshell. And we really thank you for your time and sitting and listening to all that gone into the plan up to date. But we still have a long way to go. And the most important part is now, is how do we get this plan adopted? How do we implement it? And how do we get the community staying involved in the process? Because that's the other point of a really good plan. A successful plan is a dynamic plan. It's not just a plan that you adopt as a city commission and goes into the economic development office and sits down at your bookcase of planning. It's a dynamic, because it is the city's plan, it's the community's plan. And the community is going to be needs to be constantly involved in the implementation of it. And so a lot of that management that we talked about, a lot of that technical assistance that we talked about, a lot of that's going to be structured so that everyone knows where they fit in, where they get to be involved with the plan. So it's not just the city hall plan, it really is a plan of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murray. And again, I really appreciate your time tonight and you going over this presentation, and as well as Leslie. Thank you for your time, and Alex for all your work, and as well as Valina, who's also on from the FIU team. You guys did an amazing job with this. I know we still have a lot of work to do, but we really thought it was important to really involve the community, involve the public, have a public setting in a place where we can provide the preliminary presentation to the public and really get that public feedback, get that public input. That qualitative data is so important to the overall process here. I know Ned and his team have really been crunching the numbers, mining the data on the city, and they're going to come back with their policy recommendations. And but we would be remiss if we didn't really include that qualitative data into this process. We're really excited about it. This is going to be the city's roadmap here economically to really develop some initiatives, programs, and create some policies here that are really impact our local community, help our small businesses, look at pockets for redevelopment, build those industry clusters, target those high wage sectors, and create those high wage jobs here in the city. And we really felt it was important to start this economic development plan process post pandemic. We know the economic landscape, the workforce landscape has totally changed since 2020, and we really want to dive into those numbers and look at that pre and post and what that new economy looked like, the establishment of more home-based businesses, those micro businesses. People left the workforce and started their business. We really wanted to look at that data and that information included in this, and we're really excited about that. We feel it's time to shine here economically, and we're just really excited about the plan. And again, Ned, I want to thank you and your staff for all your efforts on this. And I do now want to open it up to the public. If you want, Manny, we'll start in person here. Anybody in the chambers want to make a comment, have any questions, please come to the podium. I'll allot everybody 3 minutes, and we'll be here to answer any questions.
Hello? Okay. Ernest George McNulty. I live at 710 Northeast 7th Street, condominium 407, Boynton Beach, Florida, 33435. Excuse me? Whoa. businesses with 5 to 10 people and 3,900 only people living and working in Boynton Beach. It's my opinion that this equation can't work. And the reason I say it can't work is because the city debt and budget has to be brought down, because the equation of what you're trying to do can never rise up to pay for that kind of debt. So I don't think you can ever expand enough business in this town without bringing in people from outside and crazy prices and things like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Woodrow Hay, Commissioner of District 2 here in the city of Boynton. I'll just make it real short because I'll have other questions when you present your development plan to the commission. But I just wanted some clarity. My address is 427 Northwest 5th Avenue, Boynton Beach. In your concept 3, did I hear you say that you would be promoting spot zoning? We talked about zoning, and as you were presenting, I thought I heard you mention, I know zoning is important because of what we're trying to accomplish, and the zoning currently may not fit. But were you supporting, you know what I mean by spot zoning?
I sure do.
Okay, is that what you were suggesting and promoting?
Well, as a former planning director, I can assure you that, well, first of all, it's illegal.
Yeah, that's what I know. I was hoping I would get that answer.
No, and that's why when we talk about zoning and land use, we talk about district. So if we were looking at a district where zoning or land use changes could help that area in general, those would be the types of things we'd look at, but certainly not at any other level less than a district level.
Okay.
Or a good block of a corridor, say.
Okay,
No, I appreciate it.
I have more questions later.
Okay.
Thank you. And I want to thank, is it Ned?
Yes.
And Leslie?
Yep.
And you, John, for this particular presentation. It's been very helpful and insightful, and I think we're on the right track. So let's
Thank
just
you
keep
so
moving.
much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
I don't see any more audience members in the chamber, so Manny, I'll go online if there's any comments or questions virtually.
We have one person with their hand raised. That's Stephen Grant. Stephen, you're
Hello.
unmuted. Feel free to speaking.
Can you confirm how you can hear me? Hi, everyone. Stephen B. Grant, Esquire, P.O. Box 424, Boynton Beach, Florida. I'm one of those 3,900 that actually works and lives in the city of Boynton Beach. I was also the former mayor, and a couple of things that I was trying to push that almost got moving forward. I'll start with the big item first and go work our way smaller, is the arena over at the Boynton Beach Mall property. One of the things that I don't know if you've mentioned is how do we work with the city and state to get additional funding through economic development, not just using our own funding. So using the sports commission or going to the county's film and television, because we do have WPTV. They are expanding their location. So how do we use the counties to help us fund economic development, because we should not have to just rely on our taxpayers alone. I heard that we got close to a feasibility study. We had an RFP, we had agreement from everybody, but then the county backed out. However, I have not received any paperwork on that. The next thing that I was trying to push was the shared micromobility. We have a tri-rail station. We have multiple bus routes, 73 that goes along Seacrest from the Tri-Rail down south to Delray, bus route 1, which is all along US 1 Federal Highway, and bus route 70, which goes from Bethesda West to our Tri-Rail station. My hope is that we can help people who are vehicularly challenged. Everyone who does not have a driver's license or does not want to drive or does not have a car, to help with the shared micromobility program that the city offers. It's something where it may be operating at a loss. However, I think it is an enterprise fund that can be generating revenue for the city, and that we have the density of 4,500 people per square mile that it works for. The last thing and for the new ideas was the signs entering the city. There is a Woolbright Road sign that looks like it's over a decade old without new paint. I see a couple of the Tree City USA signs in the median, just trying to, not just the branding of the certain locations, but the branding of coming into the city, that we hope we get approval from the Arts Commission, because that's something where the city has the benefit of other input from an advisory board. The two things that I want to make comments is for the businesses was the service industry for attorneys, insurance included as related industries for the architect and engineering, or was that another service that they were included under? I got a head nod saying architect and engineering. I think the city needs to reach out more for attorneys, being 5 miles from the South County Circuit Court and 15 miles from the main branch in West Palm Beach. I think that along with the micromobility, finding express routes with Palm Tran to those locations would help out. And then the other thing that was not mentioned was the Title I schools in Boynton Beach. I believe 8 out of the 9 public schools are Title I. For those that aren't aware, Title I schools means that I believe over 80% of the students are on free or reduced lunch, which means their parents qualify based on their income, that they receive extra government assistance. I think that in order to attract more people to live and work here, the city needs to add services to the schools on an after-school basis. I know I tried the intramural program, but it's something where the city having staff available to go to the schools on a rotated basis in order for these children, the next generation of workforce, to have skills and character needed for the workforce in the future. And I think that that's kind of my input would be, is that the city needs to work on the transportation and the signage and the next generation of workforce. And then also, I guess the other question is that I don't think I saw, the 55 and older communities as part of the study and how that affects our economic activity. I know I attended the Latitudes 55 and older community in Daytona Beach, also a Margaritaville. I think that is something where the restaurant retail industry along our Congress corridor and US 1 corridor needs to be supported for the 55 and older, and how do we make it easier for people who want to be in a golf cart go up and down the roads. And that's it for me. So thank you again, John, David, Ned, Leslie, and Valina. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you so much for the comments. I really appreciate it. Manny, any other comments or questions virtually?
We have no other hands raised.
Thank you so much, Manny. Did you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. We really appreciated your support as mayor for both the equity assessment and the economic development plan that's nearing completion. I don't know if I can answer all the questions you had, but you raised a number of really good points as well as questions. And if there's anything I forgot, maybe Leslie can kick in. But as far as the financing is concerned, we are looking at
private financing. There is a number of different types of community economic development financing that's being done in locations, not only in Florida, but around the nation that really focuses in on capital funds for small businesses that would all be privately supported. So that's something that will be a part of the plan. You talked about education. That is really important. We've included that in past plans we've done. Beyond education, although I think it's all related. You know, our young children all the way up through junior high, high school and beyond, into workforce development, workforce training, and even voc education. These are all really important aspects of an economic development plan. We will address that, as you mentioned, with the Title I schools. You mentioned the transportation component, really critical. That's why we're really glad to see the High Ridge TOD district. We'd like to look at that, real opportunities there, not only for TOD, but like you talked about in terms of mobility programs and other things that can address those who live along that corridor and to get cars off the road, but also those who really need assistance in terms of mobility. The 55 and over population in the city, really important. That will be included in the actual competitive assessment. We'll include demographic trends and population trends and obviously anything to do with age and our households and families. All that will be included in the competitive assessment and addressed as part of the plan itself. Leslie, is there anything you'd like to add to any of those comments that or questions that Steve had? Are you muted? I don't know.
Okay, thank you for your patience on getting unmuted. And just the last point too, I think that gateway consideration is fundamental. Not just those access points that you mentioned and those existing gateway landmarks in the city, but just thinking through holistically when a prospective business or a customer from outside the area comes into Boynton Beach for many of the access points, what are those impressions and where does that branding begin? And I think that was a very a critical piece of the conversation. I'm glad that was surfaced today, and that is a key part of the strategy.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Leslie. I'm glad you brought it up, Steve, because that has been included in a number of studies that we've done recently. It's always been my motto that if you have a commercial corridor running through your city, you take ownership of it. Granted, a lot of these are state county roads, but the idea of, you know, of a commercial gateway into your city, there needs to be gateway improvements. There needs to be a number of different things that can be done, and a lot of them at really low cost. A lot of times, the private sector will get involved in those types of improvements. But really important that the city of Boynton Beach look at its entry points on Federal Highway and Boynton Beach Boulevard, Woolbright. All these really important gateways really need to be Boynton Beach's gateways, and there's different ways of addressing that. And it does get into the whole branding piece, which obviously is going to be a big part of the plan itself. So I really appreciate all those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned and Leslie. Manny, just to confirm, any other hands raised or anybody virtually?
We don't have any other hands raised in the attendance. We still have Valenia Scott, who's a panelist. Would you like to unmute her? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and wrap up now. There's all the comments and questions are in. Again, I just want to thank Ned, Alex, Leslie, and Valina for all their efforts on the FIU team. We really appreciate it. We're really looking forward to this. We're really excited as a city. And again, we do feel like it's our time to shine now in Boynton Beach, and we're going to have a plan to do it. So I'm looking forward to it. As Ned said, the implementation part is critical. We don't want it to be another plan that gets developed and not implemented. So we're really looking forward to that implementation part. Please be in contact with the city for those next steps when it goes to the commission, when it'll be adopted. Really looking forward to it. And again, just want to thank Ned and his team from FIU and those who came and participated and attended in tonight's event, both in person and virtually. We really do appreciate it. Thank you, Manny and Charles, and we can go ahead and close it out.